Coming up, I'll show you one of the most affected parts of California caused by this drought crisis, what water restrictions mean for growers, and how it could impact your wallet.
A monument to Edward Snowden got a few looks before it was quickly taken down today, but those behind this tribute to the NSA leaker say they're ready to bring it back. And you may call it the rise of the machines, robotic technology advancing so quickly, your first robot may be the family helper. It is Monday, April 6th, 8 p.m. in Washington, D.C. I'm Ben Swan, and this is RT America. We begin as California goes into full-fledged crisis mode over its historic drought. Governor Jerry Brown has announced historic water restrictions on businesses, on local governments, and city residents. Earlier, he fast-tracked $1 billion in funding for water infrastructure projects. But where does that leave the farmers? RT's Lindsay France reports from California's Central Valley.
Farms in agriculture are prospering, and they could go out of business next year. How many businesses do you know that are prospering and profitable that go out of business? None. It's going to happen in California, I guarantee you. If we have no water next year, it's going to happen. Successful farms are going to go out of business.
Just as Joe Del Bosque was making plans to hand down the farm he built with his own two hands to the next generation, a perfect storm hit California. One of the worst droughts on record. 4 years of little rain in the lowlands, scant snow in the mountains, plus high temperatures statewide. Standing in a meadow in the Sierra Nevada mountains on what should have been several feet of snow, Governor Jerry Brown announced California's first ever mandated water restrictions last week. The directive mostly reins in residents and cities. But for farmers, it's pretty much the same old story. Zero water reserved for crops.
We're kind of wondering where that does leave us.
He'd hoped that President Obama's visit to his fields last year might get the message out and yield results for allotting farms more surface water.
And I told him, Mr. President, if we don't have water for this field, we're not going to grow any melons there.
Sierra Nevada's snowpack drains into a large low-lying delta. Vast quantities of fresh water flow straight out from there into the ocean, creating a water wall to keep the salt out of the delta. The remaining water is diverted to cities, fish habitats, then farms. After a dry winter, 2015 has arrived, and the field where Obama spoke still lies empty.
Since we've changed to drip irrigation, we actually produce 30% more crop with 30% less water.
And yet it's still not enough. It takes 60 gallons to grow one melon. On this 125-acre field alone, Del Bosque could employ up to 150 people, and with his water-efficient drip irrigation system, produce 1,250,000 cantaloupe. Steve Malenka deals in tractors, and right now, no one wants a 5-year, $300,000 loan on one.
All of us are being affected. There's an irrigation company that supplies irrigation equipment. There's tractor dealerships, there's car dealerships selling cars to the farmers, and everybody's affected. There's without exception.
Judging by the asparagus he showed me, they won't be. 100 gallons of water are needed to grow 1 pound, which is why 20 workers are in the fields instead of hundreds, and just a few dozen bins are needed. A common solution that farmers like Del Bosque offer is this. During rains, increase pumping on rivers and reservoirs, allowing farmers to put that rain in the bank and use it in the hot summer months instead of turning to other methods. What do you do for your family's water in the homes around here?
Most of them are on groundwater. A lot of the cities, even the small towns, have wells and use groundwater.
That groundwater will take years to replenish, and it's on track to be further regulated. The alternative is buying water from farmers with older water rights. 20 years ago, water cost $80 for an acre foot. That's jumped to between $1,200 to $1,400, an investment only used sparingly on the best returns.
It was now not necessarily how much can we make per acre, it's how much can we make with an acre foot of water.
Customers may not be feeling the pinch of the drought at the grocery store checkout stand yet, but you can bet as the drought continues, as water restrictions continue and fields lie fallow for longer, you will feel a price hike in things such as lettuce, broccoli, cantaloupe, pistachios, and of course, good old asparagus.
We grow the kind of foods that the First Lady would like to see our children eating to be healthier and less obese. We grow the fruits, nuts, and vegetables that everybody wants now. That's why we're fighting so hard, because those consumers have so much demand for what we grow. They want healthier food, and this is where we grow it. When you run out of water, you stop.
4 years into the drought, Del Bosque estimates 3 million acres are unplanted here, with more to come if his predictions are correct. In California's Central Valley, Lindsay France, RT.
Now to another part of the country with water problems, but of a different kind. Over in Baltimore, residents there who are behind on their water bills have until Wednesday to settle the issue. After that, 25,000 people could potentially have their water shut off. I was joined earlier by RT correspondent Manuel Rapolo from Baltimore.
The city's public works department has announced they've already scheduled that Wednesday is the day that they're going to move forward with these planned water shutoffs. Now, interestingly enough, walking around, we're standing in front of the municipal building where people were paying their water bills today. A lot of the folks that we've talked to actually had no idea that this massive water shutoff is going to begin this week. One person that we spoke to, Dorothy Hall, happened to find out that her home was subject to water shutoff after finding out that her landlord was 6 months behind on his water bill, and she had to front the money, had to cover his portion of the water bill. And she says that there's a lot of people that simply don't know that this is the case. Take a listen.
News comes on early in the morning from 4:30 on up to 9. Then it comes on 4, 5, and 6 in the evening. And they need to put it on every one of them so that people, the ones that don't know, can become aware of what's, going on with this water thing, because I found out through some friends of mine the hard way. They will come and shut your water off.
So in Dorothy's case, what she was paying today, she was paying a $300 bill, and she said that she was able to pay that. It was very hard for her, but that there's a lot of other people that are in that situation, but a lot of the low-income people, specifically a lot of renters in the city here in Baltimore, simply can't afford that on this low-income economy. Ben?
It was hard for her, but it may not have all been her bill. If the landlords are the ones responsible but aren't paying, wouldn't this disproportionately affect the renters?
That's absolutely right, and that's one thing that advocacy groups here in Baltimore are saying, that it's going to be the low-income people here in the city, the renters. Consider that half of the city's 1.8 million residents are renters, and if their landlords are delinquent on these bills, if their landlords are late on these payments, and these folks will stand to have their water cut off as well. And another point worth mentioning is that the vast majority of these $40 million that are owed to the city belong to commercial landowners, to businesses, to corporations. So advocacy groups like the Public Justice Center, for example, are saying that the city is giving a lot of these corporations the white glove treatment, giving them the opportunity to make payment plans for the city to pay off their water bills. But the average person here in Baltimore, the average low-income earner, the average low-income renter, is not given that same opportunity. Now, earlier today we had a chance to speak to someone at the Public Works who said that they don't really fully understand why there's so much buzz over this water cutoff, because these water cutoffs happen every year. And in a statement that they provided to RT, I'll read you, they said, quote, they said, "Turning off water service is a last effort to recover money owed by all customers, large and small. About 23,000 accounts are eligible for turnoff, representing more than $40 million in uncollected revenue. If this money is not recovered, it has to be made up by the majority of customers who do pay their bills." Now, right now, there are advocacy groups and a lot of mobilized efforts in place right now to try to pass a moratorium to stop these water cutoffs from taking place, or find another solution that doesn't involve thousands of residents here in Baltimore going without water. Ben?
Well, on that point, first of all, they're surprised that people are making a big deal out of this. No city in the country is cutting off 23,000 people at a time. That's a very unusual number. Secondly, they say that if they have to cut it off, then ultimately, if they don't, then everyone else is going to have to pay for it. I guarantee you it's going to show up in other people's bills, even if the water's cut off. But beyond all of that, this is very reminiscent, is it not, of what was happening in Detroit last year?
Absolutely. There's a lot of comparisons being made already, and just to kind of build off of what you said, it's about scale. Those 23,000 accounts that could possibly have their water turned off, but it is very reminiscent of what we continue to see play out in Detroit. And in Detroit, we know that even the United Nations had to step in, but even the UN wasn't able to halt what at one point was as many as 3,000 account shutoffs taking place every week. But we have to make clear that there are differences between what we saw in the fiscal difficulties that Detroit was undergoing that led to, in 2013, for example, Detroit filed the largest municipal bankruptcy in U.S. history. That's one thing that officials here in Baltimore are saying they're working very hard not to see replicated. Of course, what everyone is hoping for is that we don't see a situation like we continue to see in Detroit, where thousands of residents are collecting rainwater to drink, are having to accept water from their neighbors just to flush their toilets. Ben?
All right, RT correspondent Manuel Rapolo from Baltimore. Thanks so much. Well, with all the talk about water across the country, including in California over the drought, how does the state there continue to build alternative energy like hydroelectric power when the state is so low on water? Last week, I spoke with Dave Elsner, Executive Director for the Energy and Policy Institute, and I asked him if California should maybe slow down on hydroelectric energy development and instead focus on natural gas production.
Well, I don't think that natural gas is the answer in California or elsewhere. Natural gas has problems with methane leakage, so it actually isn't necessarily cleaner than coal in terms of its climate benefits. It could actually be detrimental to the climate. And there are solutions that California could use, like solar and wind, and that they're already using to meet the electricity demand in the state.
You know, when we talk about natural gas and specifically to California, the issue of water there, this is where a lot of this, conversation is being spurred by. But at the same time, there are a lot of concerns about natural gas and how it affects drinking water, groundwater. Would this not just be creating a bigger issue when it comes to the water issues associated with California?
I think that's entirely possible. There have been cases where natural gas fracking has actually contaminated drinking water. And that's a huge concern in a state like California that's already struggling to meet the demands of the populace and agriculture for its water use.
Let's talk about Costa Rica. Some environmental groups are comparing Costa Rica to California, saying that Costa Rica is running without having to burn a single fossil fuel right now. It's been doing so for 75 straight days, which is certainly not an eternity, but it's a pretty good stretch here to begin with. Obviously, they've had a lot of heavy rainfall. Costa Rica is a very tropical climate, and the advantages of hydroelectric power are being touted because of what's happening in Costa Rica. But California is in a very different geographical location. The climate there is very different. Is this something that can actually work in California?
Well, Costa Rica's milestone is a big one. The fact that they've been able to run their grid on 100% renewables for 75 days is a huge milestone and should be applauded. I think in California, how we're going to get to larger renewable concentration is through a diverse set of energy sources. It's going to be hydroelectric and wind and solar and storage. All of those 21st century electricity technologies can come together to really to meet the demand of California's grid in a clean way.
In terms of the timeline, though, because what it takes to get to 100% renewable energies, wind, electric, solar, not electric, but the hydroelectric and solar. In order to be able to get there, I mean, you've got to be producing a lot of energy coming from, the wind farms and from solar farms. Is California anywhere near being able to do that? Is the technology anywhere near being able to do that?
Yes to both questions. First of all, the utilities in California are already on track to meet their goal of 1/3 of the electricity coming from clean energy sources by 2020. And the governor has just announced that he wants 50% to be from clean energy sources by 2030. Both of those goals are achievable in a cost-effective way, and that's because of the growth of affordable renewable energy. Clean energy is now a mainstream energy source and can meet the demands of our 21st century very easily and in a cost-effective way.
Off the top of your head, do you know which is the largest supplier of clean energy to California? Is it wind? Is it solar? Is it hydroelectric?
I don't know off the top of my head, but I know that between all of them, they're on track to meet 1/3 by 2020, which is a huge milestone. And in Germany, they're meeting a big majority of their grid demand from solar energy because of sound public policies and investments that they're making.
When you rely so much, though, on these natural resources in order to be able to produce energy, doesn't that at some point fall victim to whatever's happening with the climate or cycles in climate? So, for instance, Costa Rica, we talked about them a minute ago, doing so well on this hydroelectric grid right now, but that's because they had a great year in terms of rainfall. 2 years from now, if they're seeing less rainfall, doesn't that create some other problems that they would have to deal with in the future?
Well, that's why we need a diversity of clean energy sources. We're not going to have just solar panels in Northern California powering the entire grid. But if you have solar panels in the desert in Southern California and wind turbines spinning in Northern California and hydroelectric power, all of those together can meet demand. And then if you add grid storage on top of that, which Elon Musk is building right now for Tesla Motors, those things can really make a big impact and make clean energy sources reliable and stable at the same time.
And that was Gabe Elsner, Executive Director at the Energy and Policy Institute. Well, a U.S. citizen has been killed during a mortar strike against Yemen by Saudi Arabia. Jamal al-Labani was on his way back from mosque prayers when he was hit in the back by shrapnel from a mortar shell. His family said that he died minutes later. For the past 3 weeks, al-Labani had told family members he was concerned about not being able to evacuate to the U.S. as the situation in Yemen deteriorated. Again, all of this came from his cousin. Now, that issue of not being able to evacuate is something that Ibrahim Hooper, the National Communications Director for the Council on American Islamic Relations, tells RT raises a serious question.
I mean, why? That's the question. We don't understand why our own government is apparently doing nothing to rescue its citizens trapped in a combat zone. I mean, it really is perplexing. Maybe there's something going on behind the scenes we don't know about, but from what we can observe, nothing is being done to help American citizens and permanent residents trapped in Yemen. We've had China send rescue missions, India, Pakistan, even Somalia rescued its citizens from Yemen. Yet our own government, which has ships in the area, has planes in the area, has military coordination with those currently bombing Yemen so that they could coordinate a no-fire zone, is doing nothing.
The State Department, by the way, says they aren't sure just how many Americans are even in Yemen, and they say they have no plans to evacuate.
We have sent out emergency messages to U.S. citizens remaining in Yemen to alert them to opportunities to leave the country. We're continuing to reevaluate the situation, and if we have any changes to whether or not we'll evacuate people, we will certainly let folks know. At this point, we have encouraged all U.S. citizens to shelter in secure locations until they are able to depart safely.
The situation in Yemen is dire. More than 200 people have been killed in Yemen's second largest city of Aden in just the past 11 days. Kentucky Senator Rand Paul is expected to make his announcement to run for president in 2016 tomorrow. Yesterday, his camp released this video touting the senator as a different kind of Republican.
Leader, one you can trust, one who works for you, and above all, it's time for a new president.
Senator Rand Paul is, of course, the son of former Texas Congressman and three-time presidential candidate Dr. Ron Paul. Senator Paul has had a lot of libertarian support in the past, but over the past year, he has moved much more toward the mainstream Republican positions while getting ready for that 2016 run. Paul is still very vocal on issues of civil liberties, government surveillance, and prison reform. It remains to be seen if he'll be able to straddle that line between libertarian voters and traditional GOP voters. But he will be an interesting candidate to watch, certainly. Meanwhile, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton has put her advisors on standby, saying an announcement could come from her camp later this week or early next week about 2016. Florida Republican Senator Marco Rubio expected to announce his 2016 campaign next week. Well, Edward Snowden may be seen as a traitor and an enemy by the U.S. government, but he certainly has a lot of fans in America. Weeks after he spoke to a sellout crowd in New York over broadband, anonymous artists put up a monument to him in Brooklyn overnight. It's now been taken down. It's something local authorities were certainly not happy with, as Alexei Yaroshevsky reports from New York.
So now this looks like one of 4 pedestals at the Fort Greene Park in Brooklyn, New York City. But for some part this morning, this was a full-blown monument to the man described by many in America as a traitor, but still he has a lot of fans. Edward Snowden, the former NSA contractor turned whistleblower. Now, overnight, a group of unidentified artists have brought a 100-pound bust of Edward Snowden and installed it on top of this pedestal. It lasted for almost 10 hours before the park authorities, in alliance with the NYPD detectives, took it down. And now the police is looking into whether this was a deliberate act of vandalism and could be classified as such. Now, this is not the first time that Edward Snowden had a monument installed to him in New York City. Now, last year in October, at Union Square in downtown Manhattan, a local artist, installed a statue to Edward Snowden, but that one lasted for only 2 hours. Now, this time, even though it lasted for more than that, almost 10 hours, it actually sparked a lot of attention. We spoke to the locals who came specifically to the park to see that monument.
I saw it online and I thought I'd come check out the installation, and I was dismayed to find that it was missing when I arrived. The obelisk is to honor the prisoners of war during the American Revolution, people that died for our freedom or gave up their freedom so we could have freedom, and that's what Snowden did.
As I've said, the artists who installed this bust of Edward Snowden have not yet been identified, although some group anonymously posted a message online justifying their actions, saying that they updated this monument to highlight those who sacrificed their safety in the fight against modern-day tyrannies. And it would be dishonor to those memorialized here not to laud those who protect the ideals they fought for. And they believe that Edward Snowden is just the man who also fought for some ideals and sacrificed his safety for the sake of safety of others. Now, there haven't been any comments coming from both the park authorities in New York City and the NYPD, but they are saying that there have not been arrests made and they will be looking into this matter. Alexei Rashevsky, RT, reporting from New York City.
It does everything your phone can do, plus more. Jibo is being called the world's first household robot. It's set to hit store shelves next year. RT's Amira David takes a look at what the device can do and how it might also challenge your privacy.
Welcome home, Eric.
Hey, buddy.
Meet Jibo, the household technology that's being billed as the world's first family robot. It's designed to socially interact with people in a way that would classify it more as a human rather than a device. And if it looks like the future of artificial intelligence, you'd be right. Jibo is equipped with AI algorithms that learn both your face and your preferences, slowly building a profile of each person it interacts with. It then uses that information to make your life a little bit easier, doing everything from reminding you about an event on your schedule,
half an hour to go grocery shopping,
to using its high-res camera to take a family photo.
By intelligently tracking the action around him, he can independently take video and photos, so that you can put down your camera and be a part of the scene.
Jibo is even designed to pick up critical clues, such as whether you're smiling or not, which also comes in handy when engaging kids in a special storytelling function.
And I'll blow your house in.
But while it provides a convenience, some consumers have already called it creepy, namely because of what it means for the user's privacy.
Your passwords, your pictures, your videos are going to be sent in what we call clear text, which means any bad guy can intercept them and can look at your pictures, look at your videos, and even communicate with the machine and turn it on and watch what's going on in your home. We see with those video cameras now, they're watching babies in their cribs and they're talking to babies. They'll be able to do the same thing with this device. They'll be able to talk to you in your home, watch you in your home. So that's where the privacy issue comes in.
However, many others aren't too concerned by that reality. And perhaps that's best evidenced by its Indiegogo campaign last summer, which raked in $2.3 million in just 2 months. On top of that, over 4,800 Jibos were pre-ordered, many at the price of $4.99. The donations and sales were enough to make the robot the most successful technology campaign on the website.
We actually had a very broad age band, so people from 25 to 55 pretty uniformly were purchasing the robot, which is really interesting.
And that's why some analysts say it could give other devices like Apple's iPad a run for its money. For now, the robot will continue in its developmental phase and slowly roll out to consumers, but by next summer, Jibo is expected to be fully commercialized and fully ready to become your next robotic roommate. Reporting in Washington, Amira David, RT.
Well, apartment complex managers in Seattle are finding a new way to catch people who don't clean up after their pets. They're turning to DNA testing. Oh yes, Let your imagination run wild. The Seattle Times reports that a company called BioPet Vet Lab from Knoxville, Tennessee, is providing its quote-unquote poo prints testing kits to 26 apartment and condo complexes and to homeowners associations in the region. At one complex, since February of 2014, tenants have been paying a one-time fee of $29.95 when they move in for DNA testing. Then, when the dog poo is left outside the building or in an elevator or a carpeted area or on a wall or whatever, it's matched to the pet. I don't know why it's on the wall. One person in one complex, get this, was fined 5 times in 1 week, over $500. Just take a plastic bag with you. BioPet says in the past 5 years, the DNA test has been used in nearly 1,000 places around the country. It's especially popular in Miami, Dallas, Los Angeles, and other large cities. $500 in fines in a week. You need to pick up after your pet. Before we go, don't forget to tune in at 9 p.m. for Larry King Now. Tonight, Catherine Schwarzenegger guest hosts a panel on digital dating apps.
Do you think there's a difference for men and women putting themselves out there on a dating app?
Well, men are looking for sex. I'm sorry, did I say that? So a woman is going to be looking more for that guy that is kind of the diamond in the rough that she's going to snatch out and she's going to make into this great guy that they're going to be a great partner with. And the guy initially is probably going to be looking for the body parts and then wondering what comes after. But that doesn't mean we don't stick around for what comes after. It's just that's what first gets us going.
Tune in at 9 p.m. Eastern tonight here on RT America. And that is our report for now. For more on the stories we've covered, go to youtube.com/RT America and check out our website, rt.com/USA. I'm Ben Swan. Question more.
that America is going through another racial upheaval right now because we have a black president. Which is why I also say, watch out, ladies, we're up next with Hillary. But let's stick with the black and white for now, because that's the current thing we're all yelling about here in my favorite country in the world. In case you haven't heard, Black Lives Matter. Somehow, through our collective conscience, that incredibly obvious statement has become the rallying cry against racism. And that's great, because black lives do matter, like every other life. And America is still racist. But because America has no therapist, we don't get the mental assistance we need to work through complex issues. So instead, we just yell at each other in frustration. A perfectly simple sentiment has now been co-opted by every angry person for any reason at all. So the message is getting distorted. And now people feel like they're getting Black Lives Matter rammed down their throats. And they are. And maybe some people need it rammed down their throats. But then don't get mad when they don't listen because they're too busy gagging. And that's kind of what's going on now, gagging. Because as a backlash to Black Lives Matter, people are stringing up nooses all over the country. Nooses, ropes, to string around black people's heads to hang them from trees. It doesn't get any more hardcore racist than a noose. And they're showing up everywhere now. One was just found hanging from a tree at Duke University. A noose was hanging from a tree outside their student center. There's no explanation or note with it, no group taking responsibility, nothing, just a noose. And nothing else is needed because the noose says it all. Racism lives here. Over in Indiana, a fire chief, out of the blue, tossed a noose to one of his firefighters who happens to be black. Message received, boss. TJ Maxx, that store that sells cheap crap made in China, they were just selling a t-shirt with a noose on it, with the adorable saying, hang loose. Got it, TJ Maxx. Over in Mississippi, a black kid was given a black doll with a noose around its neck by a coworker who said, "This reminds me of you." Nice, coworker, nice. There's more too, but you get the point. Lots of nooses are popping up all over America right now because this is how we handle any issue in this country, with intolerance and screaming and sensationalism. Why? Because when it comes to listening and absorbing complex issues, America is a real pain in the neck. Get ready, ladies. We're up next. Tonight, let's talk about that.